It is midnight in Washington, 5 in London, and 2 on a Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. Let's get a check of the main stories we're following at this hour. Any future provocation by North Korea will be met with a firm response. Now, that is according to the South Korean president, who also placed emphasis on national security and the safety of the Korean people in a recent interview with CNN. The leader of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party throws his full support behind President Park's 3-year economic innovation plan and also pledges efficient parliamentary politics in his New Year's press conference. And students in the U.S. could soon learn to identify the body of water between Korea and Japan as both the East Sea and the Sea of Japan. This as the Virginia State Legislative Subcommittee gives the green light to one of the 3 pending bills to refer to the water as both names in school textbooks. We'll have those stories and more. But first, right here in this country. Now, ahead of our overseas trip this week, President Park Geun-hye reiterated that any North Korean provocation will be met with a very firm response. In an interview with CNN Monday, President Park said further provocations have been predicted by experts at home and abroad, and that she puts the utmost priority on national security and safeguarding the South Korean people. Now, saying North Korea has become even more unpredictable after the purge of leader Kim Jong-un's uncle, she stressed on the need to prepare for any eventuality. Now, with regards to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to a controversial war-linked shrine, the president said she hopes to form a future-oriented relations with Tokyo based on right understanding of history. Meanwhile, a former security aide to U.S. President Barack Obama has called on Washington to pursue trilateral talks with South Korea and China on the future of the Korean peninsula. In an interview with the Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency Monday, Jeffrey Bader said cooperation among the 3 is critical as the North Korean regime is becoming increasingly unpredictable. Now, he said that whereas in the past China might have been reluctant to hold trilateral talks, Beijing may be more open to that idea now as Chinese leadership has grown disillusioned with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Now, Bader, currently a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, also called on Japan to take a serious look at history and recognize that its wartime atrocities were unacceptable. President Park Geun-hye is set to rack up some serious air miles as she embarks on a 9-day trip to India and Switzerland on Wednesday. Arirang News Presidential Office correspondent Oh Jin-ju will be traveling with the president, and she tells us what she aims to accomplish during her state visits to the 2 countries.
President Park will focus on promoting her vision for a creative economy and securing greater foreign investment in Korea during her trip to India and Switzerland. In India, President Park will hold bilateral talks with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and discuss ways to further develop the 2 countries' cooperation in various fields, ranging from economic affairs to science and information communications technology. India is the world's 2nd largest market with a population of 1.2 billion and is currently moving ahead with a 5-year economic development plan that runs through 2017. The Presidential Office of Chawada says there is great potential in many areas for cooperation between Korea and India will be a key partner in helping Korea realize a creative economy, one of the Park administration's major goals.
India is globally competitive in high-tech industries such as IT and aerospace. Korea will sign MOUs with India in the fields of science, information and communications technology and aerospace during the president's visit to strengthen cooperation, especially in sectors related to the creative economy.
The president will also seek ways to upgrade the Korea-India Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which took effect in 2010, and urge the Indian government to support Korean companies, including POSCO, which has been working on a project in the Indian state of Odisha for 8 years now. President Park will be the first Korean leader to make a state visit to Switzerland. There she will hold a bilateral summit with President of the Swiss Confederation, Didier Burkhalter, and visit economic sites to benchmark Switzerland's vocational training system and its economic system, which is centered around small and mid-sized firms, all of which could be linked to her vision for a creative economy. The president will wrap up her trip at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where she will meet with the CEOs of global companies such as Cisco and Siemens and urge foreign businesses to invest in Korea. Oh Jun-ju, Arirang News.
Now, shifting to the political realm, the chairman of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party has thrown his full support behind President Park Geun-hye's ambitious three-year economic innovation plan. Now, he also vowed to improve the efficiency of parliamentary politics in his New Year's press conference on this Tuesday. Arirang's national politics correspondent Yeon-ji reports.
Ruling party chief Hwang Woo-yea called for a rigorous reform of public sector corporations in his New Year's press conference Tuesday, saying many of them are poorly managed and weighed down with debt.
My party will set up a committee for economic reform, which will have 2 subcommittees, each tasked with reforming public corporations and regulations.
He also pledged to boost domestic demand and foster the service sector. Regarding healthcare policy, Hwang said the party wants to enable hospitals to form for-profit subsidiaries. He denied that doing so would privatize the health sector.
The healthcare policy my party and the government are pushing for would keep the public healthcare system centered around the National Health Insurance Service, while allowing hospitals to set up for-profit subsidiaries, such as hotels, restaurants, and funeral halls. This will allow hospitals to increase their profits and improve management. Again, this is not a privatization of medical services, nor does it have anything to do with a spike in medical fees.
In line with President Park's emphasis on reunification, Hwang said his party will start laying the groundwork for reunification, including the passage of a North Korea human rights bill. The existing North Korea human rights bill, first introduced by the Saenuri Party in 2005, stipulates that the South Korean government make rigorous efforts to protect the human rights of the North Korean people, currently a population of roughly 24 million. But the bill has been stuck in Parliament for years due to bipartisan differences over the content. The Democratic Party chief said on Monday that his party will soon draft a bill aimed at improving the human rights and livelihoods of North Koreans. The ruling party chief stressed that his party's #1 priority is to reduce social conflict and achieve national unity, saying that those things are key for achieving reunification and bringing the country a per capita income of $40,000. He also pledged to normalize parliamentary politics and strengthen relations with the opposition party. Kim Yeon-ji, Arirang News.
Pope Francis continues to spread his message of peace and unity, this time calling on the two Koreas to work towards reconciliation on the Korean peninsula. Now, in a speech to the Vatican Diplomatic Corps Monday, the Pope said he trusted that for the good of all the Korean people, the interested parties will tirelessly seek out points of agreement. Francis also said he was gravely worried about the humanitarian situation in Syria and said urgent aid should be allowed to reach all parts of that country. He also pleaded for peace in Egypt, Iraq, South Sudan, Nigeria, and the Central African Republic. Meanwhile, school textbooks in the United States may soon identify the body of water between Korea and Japan by 2 names instead of 1. On Monday, an Education and Health Subcommittee of the Virginia State Senate unanimously passed one of the 3 pending bills to designate the sea, both the East Sea and the current Sea of Japan, in public school textbooks used in the state in the future. Now, the other 2 pending bills contain similar stipulations and are also likely to be approved with strong bipartisan support. If passed by the full Senate, the bill will take effect on July 1st.
All of the day's important events. Events close to home, around the world.
Second half last, figure out what winners.
The arts and culture scene and the heart of global business.
Experts added that
Arirang News has your whole day covered.
the legislature will convene a plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government.
The Korean government will make all-out efforts to streamline red tapes and ease regulations this year as it seeks to attract foreign investment and stoke domestic demand, particularly in the service sector. Here's our Yoo Li-an with this report.
Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik on Tuesday promised radical regulatory changes this year, aimed at making it easier for companies at home and abroad to invest in the country. In his first meeting this year with senior policymakers and business leaders, Yoon also vowed steps to help businessmen cope with a weakening yen that hurts competitiveness of local products in export markets. The government will rewrite regulations to remove all barriers blocking investment, except for a new minimum list of restriction. The move is part of a campaign by President Park Geun-hye's administration to reinvigorate the export-driven economy by stimulating domestic demand, particularly in the areas of software, education, tourism, health, and financial services. Park has placed high priority on streamlining red tapes in the high value-added service sector so private investment can flow into promising areas of the economy. Deregulation has until now been mostly undertaken in the manufacturing and environment sectors. Yurian, Arirang News.
Now moving over to Korea's auto market, Korea's auto exports surged to a record high of almost $50 billion last year as local automakers expanded their presence in the luxury sedan market. Exports to the U.S. also hit a record high in 2013. Arirang News' Hwang Woo-yea has the details.
Korean auto exports reached a record high of $48.7 billion last year despite production losses of billions of dollars following strikes by Korean auto workers. That is up more than 3% from a year earlier. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says that the nation's auto exports got a boost from sales of luxury sedans in advanced economies like the United States and the European Union. Exports to the U.S. in particular are estimated to exceed a record $12 billion in 2013, according to the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association. The U.S. sales of luxury sedans produced by Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors, including the Hyundai Genesis, jumped over 20% last year from 2012. The ministry said sales were also helped by a moderate economic recovery in the U.S., which pushed up auto demand, and Korea's free trade agreement with the EU, which raised the price competitiveness of Korean automobiles. Meanwhile, Hyundai Motor, the nation's largest automaker, is aiming to boost its market share in the U.S. to 4.7% this year from 4.6% in 2013, with its new Genesis and Sonata models driving gains. Hwang Woo-yea, Arirang News.
Continuing now with our part 2 of our 5-part series on Korea's industrial competitiveness. Now this time we're going to take a look at the country's strong global reputation for building high-quality industrial plants. Korea's expertise in the field has been reflected in a steady rise of overseas orders in recent years. Here's our Kim Young-gil.
Korean industrial plants have built up a track record of building plants ahead of schedule without creating safety problems. That helped Korean construction companies enter a phase of steady growth since their overseas plant orders topped $60 billion in 2010. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy forecasts the amount of overseas orders in 2014 to top $70 billion.
Hyundai Construction and Engineering expects to win mega projects this year by diversifying its bidding areas. We expect that more than 70% of orders will come from overseas this year.
Although orders from the Middle Eastern countries have been on the decline in recent years, market analysts expect new orders to emerge in the region this year on signs of the global economic recovery. Construction companies also plan to set their sights wider. Korean construction companies are planning to target the Middle East and Asia this year. They want to build a large-scale oil refinery and petrochemical plants like this one, as you can see behind me. The Korea Plant Industries Association expects the global oil refinery market to grow by 4% this year and the next. However, experts warn that although Korean construction companies have become globally competitive in oil refinery and petrochemical plant construction through massive projects in the Middle East since 1973, Korean construction companies are competing among themselves in cutthroat fashion.
We are facing competition, not just among ourselves, but also from Chinese, Japanese, and European construction companies. We need to diversify our markets and focus more on technology-integrated projects. like nuclear power plants, renewable energy plants, and civil infrastructure.
This year, the government plans to help finance Korean construction companies in the initial stages of the bidding process for overseas business projects and help companies expand their markets into Africa and Southeast Asia. Kim Young-gun, Arirang News.
Taking a brief look at how the local stock market is doing at this hour. Seoul shares reversed earlier gains to edge lower in early trading on this Tuesday, tracking global markets as foreigners offloaded local stocks, but the yen's sharp rise limited further losses. As of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi was down nearly 0.2%, trading at 1946, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq was also in negative territory by just about that much. Now, on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading weaker against the greenback at roughly 1,058 won. Now, shifting our focus, diplomats are trying to persuade the warring sides in Syria to firstly agree to show up at the international talks in Geneva next Wednesday, and secondly, to take a series of steps to improve the atmosphere at the discussions. Kwon So-ah reports.
With around 1 week remaining until the Syria Peace Conference, known as Geneva II, kicks off in the Swiss city, the United States and Britain are pressing the Syrian opposition coalition to attend the talks, warning the coalition that they may stop supporting them to the extent they have if they fail to show up. This according to a senior official from the coalition who asked not to be named. He added other countries like France, Saudi Arabia and Turkey asked the coalition to come, but in a less assertive tone. Washington and London's stronger demand comes after the Friends of Syria, an international group who oppose Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, called for the Syrian opposition's attendance during a meeting in Paris on Sunday. Earlier, the rebels had said they would only attend if President Assad plays no role. The coalition says it will decide on its participation by Friday. The Assad regime has already submitted its list of attendees. It's also unclear whether Iran, which has a major influence in Syria, will attend, with deep divisions among world powers on that subject. The US and Britain say Iranian delegates can come to Geneva if they accept the call for a power transition away from the Assad regime, but Russia wants Iran there whatever the conditions. This according to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who held talks with US Secretary of State John Kerry in Paris on Monday. Lavrov and Kerry were joined by UN envoy for Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, where the three officials also talked about possible preconditions ahead of the peace talks.
But we talked today about the possibility of trying to encourage a ceasefire, maybe a localized ceasefire, beginning with Aleppo. And both of us have agreed to try to work to see if that could be achieved.
Possible prisoner exchanges and opening humanitarian access to besieged areas were discussed too, with the aim of creating a better atmosphere in Geneva. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And now it's time for our daily arts and culture segment with our Lee Tae-ho. And now with the Old Man Winter descending upon us here in Seoul, Tae-ho brings in a list of musicals that can be enjoyed indoors out of the cold. Good afternoon to you, Tae-ho.
Good afternoon.
So what do you have for us?
Well, there are a number of fantastic musicals currently running right here in Seoul. And if you're not one to brave the cold winter weather outside like me, here's a list of hot musicals that are currently running, heating up the stages. The Swedish pop music group ABBA swept the global music scene in the 1970s, and in 1999, their music became the core of the very successful British musical Mamma Mia. Now, 14 years later and 10 years since its first showing here in Korea, the original cast of the musical is performing at Blue Square Samsung Electronics Hall in Yongsan-gu, Seoul.
I've always been a fan of ABBA's music, so I've watched the movie Mamma Mia and the musical several times. Every time I watch it, I'm touched in a different way.
Also currently running is the musical Man of La Mancha, based on Miguel de Cervantes' story, Don Quixote. The double roles of Cervantes and Quixote are being played by acclaimed actors Cho Sung-woo and Chung Sung-hwa. The musical The Three Musketeers is also running right here in Korea at the Seongnam Arts Center in the city of Seongnam. It has been retooled for Korean audiences and has been a popular draw here in Korea as well as in Japan. And the original Korean musical Youth March is marching along at the Kepco Arts Center in Seochogu, Seoul. Rocking the stage with the original story from its first performance in 2007, the musical has maintained a steady popularity despite the influx of licensed musicals from abroad.
Musicals have not been focused on the marketing of one particular star. What they have been successful in doing is moving and speaking to the audience, whether that be a cheerful or heavy feeling. This has been the secret behind their success.
Whether you're young or old, from Korea or abroad, these musicals are sure to warm you up during this bitterly cold winter season.
You know, a really great list of successful, popular, and globally renowned musicals playing here in Seoul that we can enjoy.
That's right. Now, and I think the popular musical Mamma Mia would be a great template for creators of original Korean musicals right here in Korea, because using the music of established artists, I think it can really draw to audiences and work as a marketing tool as well.
Right, and that was the case with Korean musical December, right? With the music of Kim Kwang-seok.
Yeah, and that was very successful. So I think we can see that as become maybe a trend in the future here in Korea.
All right, thank you for that, Taeho. And what about for those of us who would like to travel to the outskirts of Seoul and looking for smaller art venues?
Well, you know, these art venues on the outside of Seoul are smaller in scale and a little bit more localized, but nonetheless, they are being met with great success. When you think of a smaller local art venue, one does not contain grandiose works of art. You could think about something like the Yangpyeong County Art Museum, just southeast of Seoul. The museum has had more than 300,000 visitors since its inception just 2 short years ago, which is 3 times the size of the local population. Visitors from all over the country come to visit, and its current second anniversary exhibition is a roaring success, with an average of 1,500 visitors per day.
Here, children can express themselves any way they want without any kind of discomfort. You can also see the artwork up close, so it's very nice.
The area is very nature-friendly and there are lots of things to see, so I come here often with my family.
And the secret to the museum's success? Professional management and experienced curators who put together exhibitions that are both modern and up-to-date.
The museum has been created so that families and people of any age can come to visit, and there are a lot of interactive exhibits for visitors. So anybody can come at any time to enjoy a variety of modern and contemporary art at our museum.
Meanwhile, the Seongbuk District Museum in Seoul is also seeing an increase in visitors as well. It opened its doors in 2009, and despite its small size, the quality of its exhibitions rivals that of larger and more established art venues. This is evidenced by the 30% increase in visitors in 2013 compared to the previous year.
Our museum always runs a tour where visitors can view exhibitions one-on-one with docents, so it makes the works on display much more accessible. Also, the subjects of our exhibitions aren't too heavy. We focus on exhibitions that tell a story.
The reputations of these 2 smaller but well-established art venues have spread by word of mouth, and the 2 establishments have become focal points for benchmarking by many other similar venues, which is hopefully a sign that more smaller, local art venues that promise great quality exhibitions will be created in the future.
You know, so this would encourage those living and outside of Seoul to attend or go to more arts exhibitions and cultural events.
That's right. Now, this is a huge step forward for, I think, a lot of communities, not just here in Seoul, but in the outskirts of Seoul, where local residents can have more accessibility to more local art venues and any type of arts and culture venues, really, because if local residents can attend these, I think it can be a source of inspiration for a younger generation of aspiring artists.
Right, and it could really grow and mature into, you know, big name theaters or or exhibitions so that people in Seoul could actually travel to those local areas to attend these events.
That's right. Now, I think it works both ways, where residents of Seoul can go down to more rural communities and help the local economy, as well as being a source of inspiration for, again, the younger generation.
All right, Taeho, thank you for that today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
All right.
Well, it is another freezing day here in Seoul, but here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that's all for me at this hour. Thank you for being here with us. I'll be back with more of the day's latest at 4 p.m. Korea time.